It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-July, one of those days with the Georgia heat wrapped around the town like a thick, sticky blanket. Children played in the sprinklers. Chalk drawings covered sidewalks, and the scent of barbecue floated lazily through the air. On Willow Street, 9-year-old Aliyah Sanders was outside her grandmother's house, carefully outlining a rainbow on the cracked pavement. Her small fingers were smudged with blue and pink, her braids tied with purple beads that clicked softly as she leaned forward to color. Across the street, something shifted. A patrol car eased around the corner, then another. A K-9 unit van pulled up behind them, its engine humming quietly. A few neighbors glanced from their porches, but didn't think much of it. Police occasionally patrolled the area, sometimes for traffic stops, sometimes for minor disturbances. Nothing ever escalated, but this time something was different. Inside one of the cruisers, Officer Darren Blake adjusted his radio. There had been a reported break-in on the next block. Suspect possibly on foot. He radioed for backup and stepped out, leash in hand. Attached to it was Rex, a Belgian Malinois with 3 years of service and 2 commendations. Trained to track, subdue, and protect. Rex barked once, sharply. Blake tugged the leash. "Easy, boy." Aliyah looked up. She had never seen a police dog up close. She wasn't scared, just curious. The dog looked strong, alert, like it had somewhere important to be. She turned back to her drawing. That's when it all unraveled. According to Officer Blake's later statement, he spotted a figure dart between 2 homes and shouted, "Go," releasing Rex to pursue. The dog shot forward, ears back, focused. But in that precise, fateful moment, the figure, if there was one, vanished. The distraction was gone. Rex, already in drive mode, turned toward the nearest movement. Aliyah, who had just stood up, chalk still in hand. What happened next seemed to play in slow motion and hyperspeed all at once. The dog veered, off course and leapt. Neighbors screamed. Aliyah's grandmother bolted off the porch. Rex clamped his jaw around Aliyah's small forearm and yanked, pulling her off her feet. Her scream pierced the summer air. Officer Blake ran. "Rex, out! Out!" he shouted, commanding the release. It took nearly 10 seconds for the dog to respond. 10 seconds of chaos. 10 seconds that would replay in the minds of everyone there for years. By the time Rex let go, Aliyah lay limp on the sidewalk, her arm bleeding badly, her pastel rainbow smeared red. Her grandmother wrapped her arms around her, yelling for someone to call an ambulance. Officer Blake kneeled beside her, panic in his eyes. He radioed dispatch. Child injured. K-9 contact. Immediate medical needed. Within minutes, sirens approached from both ends of the street. Paramedics loaded Aliyah onto a stretcher. Her eyes fluttered open, closed, then open again. "Is my rainbow ruined?" she asked faintly. Nobody had an answer. That night, the town changed. Photos from a neighbor's phone surfaced on social media. The bite mark, the chalk drawing, the blood, the dog in the distance, still wearing its harness. The image was haunting, and it spread like wildfire. The police department issued a statement calling the incident deeply regrettable and stating that an internal investigation would begin immediately. They emphasized that Rex was a highly trained officer and that this was an unfortunate deviation. But for the Sanders family and much of the community, it wasn't enough. Not even close. Protests began the next day. Peaceful at first. Candles, signs, prayers. But they grew louder. Justice for Aliyah. No more K-9 South in our neighborhood. Protect our children, not your mistakes. Local reporters picked up the story. Penn State media. The story of a little black girl attacked by a police dog in her own front yard struck a chord across communities. Still grappling with trust in law enforcement. In a town where nothing big ever happened, something enormous had just occurred. Everyone, whether they realized it or not, had just become part of a story that would echo far beyond Willow Street. By Wednesday morning, Willow Street didn't feel like Willow Street anymore. Police tape still fluttered in the breeze near the sidewalk where Alia had been attacked. Her chalk drawings, smeared with dried blood and footprints, were still visible in the cracks. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a stranger, had laid sunflowers in a circle around the drawing of the rainbow, now incomplete. But it wasn't just the street that looked different. It was the whole town. Cars honked as they passed the Sanders house, not out of anger, but solidarity. Strangers dropped off food. Parents from across the county called the elementary school to ask about Alaya, asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. Dozens of children sent hand-drawn cards. Most showed rainbows. One simply read, "I'm sorry the world didn't protect you." At the hospital, Alia was recovering slowly. Doctors had stitched up the deep puncture wounds in her arm. She couldn't move it much. Her mother sat beside her, holding her uninjured hand and whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "I won't let them get away with this," she said, tears running down her cheeks. Not this time. The story was already exploding. Local station WXTR aired the footage at 5 p.m. sharp. A blurry video taken by a neighbor's security camera showed the K9 lunging, not toward a fleeing suspect, but toward a small, motionless figure beside the sidewalk. The footage cut off before impact, but it was enough. Within hours, the story hit state networks, then national ones. 9-year-old girl mauled by police dog in front of her home. Georgia family demands accountability. After K9 attack, officer says protocol was followed. Community says otherwise. By Thursday, a GoFundMe for Alia's medical bills reached $45,000. Civil rights groups from Atlanta called the family to offer legal aid. One law firm offered to represent them pro bono. Activists from neighboring counties scheduled a rally. For the weekend, tensions grew. Officer Blake had been placed on administrative leave pending the internal review. He hadn't made a statement beyond the brief one he gave through the department. This was a tragic accident. My thoughts are with the family. But people weren't buying it. He gave that dog an attack order and didn't have control over it, period. One community leader said during a radio interview, "If that's how trained this dog is, what happens when it's someone else's kid next?" Others were more cautious, especially older residents who had lived through difficult decades of racial tension in the South. "Let's just wait for the investigation," one local pastor urged. But yes, someone has to answer for this. Yet, for many, the wait felt like complicity. Friday afternoon, a crowd gathered in front of the town courthouse. They held signs. "Justice for Alia. Children aren't targets. Retrain or resign." Alia's uncle spoke through a bullhorn. She wasn't a threat. She was a little girl with chalk. "They let a weapon loose on our block. And now they want to tell us it was a mistake?" His voice cracked. "It was a mistake. A mistake that nearly took my niece's arm." The mayor called for calm, while the police chief released a statement asking for patience as the investigation unfolded. But their words couldn't quiet the storm back in the hospital. Alaya watched the news from her bed. Her bandages itched, but she didn't complain. She stared at the screen as her picture appeared beside headlines she couldn't fully understand yet. "Why are they mad at me?" she asked softly. Her mother turned off the TV. "They're not mad at you, baby. They're mad for you." But deep inside, she knew this wasn't going away. Not soon. Not ever. Her daughter's innocence had collided with a system that claimed to protect, and the whole town was beginning to realize the cracks ran deeper than just one bite. This wasn't just about one officer, one dog, or one little girl. This was about all of them. Monday morning came like a THUNDERCLA. The courthouse on Main Street, normally quiet and overlooked, had become the eye of a storm. Reporters gathered before sunrise, camera tripods crowding the sidewalk. Locals filled the wooden benches outside the courtroom hours before the doors opened, sipping gas station coffee and murmuring in tight, serious tones. The people came dressed for a cause. On one side of the courtroom, men and women wore blue t-shirts that read, "Support the Blue, Trust Our Training." They stood with stiff backs and folded arms, some of them friends and family of law enforcement. On the other side sat residents in plain black shirts, many with homemade pins that read, "Justice for Aliyah." They were teachers, barbers, church deacons, cashiers, the people who had grown up down the street from the Sanders family and knew Aliyah not as a headline, but as the little girl who always drew butterflies in chalk. Aliyah herself sat near the front, her left arm still bandaged, her right hand wrapped tightly around her mother's fingers. She wore a lavender dress with white sneakers. Her teddy bear, the one she had named Justice after the attack, sat on her lap. The bailiff called for order. All rise. Judge Helen Monroe entered, tall, composed, and unsmiling. A former public defender known for being fair, but no nonsense. She glanced over the packed room, then down to the plaintiff's table, where Aliyah's family sat with their legal team. Her eyes then flicked to Officer Blake, seated stiffly at the defense table, hands folded, jaw clenched. This court is now in session. The quiet was thunderous. The prosecution began by playing the now infamous video clip security footage from the neighbor's porch camera. The footage paused at the exact moment the dog turned toward Aliyah. There she was, a small girl, frozen beside a half-finished chalk rainbow. "You are looking," the lawyer said, voice low and even at a child seconds before she was. Torn open by a police K-9 that had no business being off-leash in a residential neighborhood. Gasps and murmurs rose, and the judge immediately tapped her gavel. Order in the court. The defense didn't dispute the injury. Instead, they leaned into the difficulty of the situation, the high-stress nature of law enforcement, the intent to protect the public, and the dog's history of successful operations. This was a tragic incident, the defense attorney said. But it was not cruelty. It was not negligence. It was a split-second failure in a fast-moving moment. He turned to the jury. Ask yourselves, if you were told there was a suspect on the loose, someone who might be armed, would you not deploy every tool you had to protect your community? But not everyone in the room was convinced. The Sanders lawyer fired back with a flurry of records. Documentation of 2 prior complaints against Officer Blake's K-9, Rex, one involving a jogger who was nearly bitten outside a park, another involving a mail carrier who was left with a bruised hip after the dog lunged. Neither incident had led to discipline. But now, she said, walking slowly toward the jury box, that same dog has permanently scarred a little girl who wasn't running, who wasn't hiding, who wasn't even moving. She was drawing. Eyes turned toward Aliyah. For a brief moment, her teddy bear slipped from her lap and landed on the floor. She reached down to grab it with her good arm. A soft jingle from the stuffed animal's bell filled the courtroom. The sound was innocent. Jarring, poetic. The judge called a short recess. People filed into the hallways, whispering, eyes darting. Inside, the wooden benches remained warm from the tension. The air carried weight. Everyone, no matter which side they sat on, could feel it. Something irreversible had already begun. This wasn't just about facts anymore, it was about truth. When the court reconvened after recess, a different kind of hush fell over the room. Not the polite silence from earlier. This was heavier, expectant, almost uneasy. Officer Darren Blake was about to take the stand. He rose from the defense table slowly, straightening his uniform jacket. It was crisp, adorned with commendation. Pins. But even from a distance, it was clear he looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally eroded. His eyes were sunken, not from sleepless nights, but from something harder to admit. Shame. He took the oath. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, he replied, voice low but firm. The defense began gently, guiding him through his background. 12 years on the force, 4 of them as a K-9 handler, over 100 operations. He spoke calmly, his tone matter of fact. I've worked with Rex for 3 years. He's a top-tier asset, smart, obedient, reliable. Was he trained to engage children? The attorney asked. No, Blake said, without hesitation. Never. He's trained to target suspects, only on command, and only when the situation warrants. And on the day in question, what were the circumstances? Blake took a slow breath. Dispatch reported a possible burglary in progress. Witnesses saw someone jump a backyard fence 3 blocks down. I arrived with Rex to track. As we moved into the area, I spotted what I believed was movement behind a garage. He paused. I gave the command. And what happened? Rex ran. I followed. But whatever I saw had disappeared. Then he turned toward the sidewalk. He looked down. For the first time, his voice cracked. He saw movement. I saw her Alia too late. I shouted to disengage, but he trailed off. The room was utterly still. Do you believe you made a mistake? The defense asked, softly. Blake didn't answer immediately. He looked over, just for a moment, toward Alia, sitting beside her mother. Her teddy bear was once again in her lap. Yes, he said finally. I did. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A judge tapped her gavel, but only once. Even she seemed frozen in place. Then the prosecution rose. Officer Blake, the prosecutor began, his tone respectful but cutting. You say Rex is obedient, correct? Yes. And yet he disobeyed your command. Twice. Blake stiffened. He was in high drive mode. K-9 South can experience tunnel vision when activated. Tunnel vision that led to a 9-year-old girl being mauled. Objection. Sustained. The prosecutor rephrased. Would you agree that Rex's behavior that day deviated from safe procedure? Blake hesitated. Yes. Would you also agree? That this wasn't the first time someone filed a complaint about him. Blake tensed. Those incidents were reviewed and deemed non-critical. Still complaints, minor ones, no one was injured. Until now, that hung in the air. The prosecutor stepped closer. Tell the court, Officer Blake, did you ever think a child could be harmed during one of your deployments? Blake swallowed hard. No, never. Then how do you explain the fact that she didn't run, didn't scream, didn't pose a threat, and was still attacked? Silence. She was just standing there, the prosecutor added, with chalk in her hand. Blake's mouth opened, then closed. He looked toward the jury, toward the judge, toward Alia. I failed, he said finally. I lost control of a tool I was supposed to command. That's the truth. A strange shift moved through the courtroom. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but something more complex. The crowd wasn't softened, but it was shaken. This wasn't a villain on the stand. This was a man bearing the weight of a moment. That shattered a child's life. The judge dismissed him. As he stepped down, he didn't return to the defense table. He walked directly out the side door, shoulders hunched like a man trying to carry something no one could help him with. Outside the courthouse, protesters continued chanting. Inside, Alalia leaned against her mother's shoulder and whispered. He said sorry without saying it. Her mother blinked, surprised. How do you know that? Alia looked down at her teddy bear and hugged it tight. Because he looked like me when I got in trouble. And I really didn't mean to. There are moments in a courtroom when words aren't necessary, when the mere presence of someone is louder than any testimony. That morning, as the judge called the next witness, the crowd leaned in. A few people stopped breathing. Some stood in the hallway on tiptoe, peering in. The bailiff called her name. Alea Sanders, please approach the bench. She stood slowly, a little unsteady on her feet. Her lavender dress flowed just past her knees, and her sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished floor. The courtroom doors had never seemed so large. With her left arm wrapped in a soft pink sling, and her right hand holding her teddy bear, she took small steps toward the witness stand. Her mother gave her a squeeze and whispered, "You're braver than anyone in this room." Alea didn't look afraid. She looked determined. The judge softened her voice. "Sweetheart, do you know what it means to tell the truth?" Alea nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And will you promise to tell only the truth today?" "Yes," she said quietly. She sat, swinging her feet just above the floor. The bear was tucked tightly into her lap. The courtroom, still and silent, waited. The prosecution approached with gentle steps. "Hi, Alea. I'm Mr. Davis. I know this might be scary, but you're doing really good. I just want to ask you some questions, okay?" "Okay," she said. "Can you tell us what you were doing that day, when the dog came?" She took a deep breath. "I was drawing on the sidewalk. I made a rainbow, and a flower, and a cloud." "Was anyone else outside with you?" "My grandma was on the porch. She was drinking her tea." "And did you see the police car?" "I heard it first," she said. "Then I saw the dog. He was barking a lot." "Did you run, Aya?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't move. My grandma told me one time, if you see a police dog, stay still so they don't think you're bad." Mr. Davis blinked. A few jurors shifted in their seats. "And then what happened?" "The dog looked at me. Then he came fast. I couldn't scream. I was too scared." She touched her bandaged arm. "He bit me right here. I tried to say stop, but my voice didn't come out." Mr. Davis's voice caught. "How did that make you feel?" Alea stared down at her shoes. "Like I disappeared. Like I didn't matter." A gasp broke the silence, somewhere in the back row. The judge didn't scold it. "Did you do anything that day to scare the dog?" She shook her head again. "I was just drawing." And Mr. Davis asked, "Do you blame the dog?" The room held its breath. Alea looked up, her eyes wide but steady. "No, I think the dog got scared too. I think he thought I was something else." "Something else?" "A bad guy," she whispered. "But I'm not. I'm just me." The room was utterly silent. Mr. Davis nodded. "Thank you, Alea. You were very brave." Then came the defense attorney, walking slowly toward the stand. He crouched a little, so he wasn't towering over her. Double quotes. "Hi, Alea. My name is Mr. Harper. I want you to know I'm really sorry about what happened to you." She didn't reply, but she didn't flinch either. "Do you remember hearing anyone yell right before the dog came?" She furrowed her brow. "Maybe. I heard a man yell go or something. Then it got loud." "Did the dog stop when the man yelled again?" She nodded slowly. "But not right away. He stayed biting." Harper nodded, thanked her, and returned to his table. The judge leaned forward. "You did very well, sweetheart. You may step down." As she stood, the room erupted, not in noise, but in emotion. A few jurors wiped away tears. One of the officers in the gallery looked down, red-faced. Even the judge took a long pause before resuming. Alea walked back to her mother, bear in hand, head high. In that moment, she wasn't a victim. She wasn't evidence. She wasn't fragile. She was power wrapped in pink and lavender. And everyone in the room knew This trial was no longer just about guilt, it was about humanity. The courtroom had barely recovered from Aaliyah's testimony. When the air shifted again, a sense of something coming, something no one expected. Her lawyer, Miss Holloway, stood slowly, adjusting her blazer. She walked to the front with a quiet confidence, then cleared her throat. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The plaintiff would like to request an unusual but powerful demonstration." Judge Monroe arched an eyebrow. "Go on." "We request that the K-9 involved in this case be brought into the courtroom under full supervision and restraint. Aaliyah herself has asked to see him." Instant murmurs spread through the gallery like electricity. The judge held up her hand for silence. "Ms. Holloway," the judge said, "this is highly unorthodox. Bringing a dog involved in a violent incident, especially one with a child victim, could be traumatic." "I understand," she replied, "but this isn't for spectacle. It's for understanding. The child wants to see the dog. She's made that clear to us." Everyone turned to look at Aaliyah. Sitting beside her mother, she gave a single nod, small but unmistakable. The judge looked long and hard at the defense table. Mr. Harper conferred with Officer Blake, who sat up straighter but didn't speak. Finally, the defense attorney turned to the judge. "We won't object, provided the dog is muzzled and leashed by a certified handler." The judge paused. She looked over the courtroom, which had gone eerily quiet. Then she nodded once, so ordered. 10 minutes later, the side doors opened. A hush fell so complete, it was as if the entire courthouse had stopped breathing. 2 officers entered, guiding a large tan and black Belgian Malinois. Rex, the K-9 unit that had torn Aaliyah's world open. His snout was bound tightly in a reinforced muzzle, and his handler held the leash in a double grip. His gait was slow, cautious, alert. He looked less like a monster than people expected. Just tired, focused, confused by the noise, the scent of tension in the air. Gasps rippled as Rex was brought to the center of the courtroom. The judge signaled for him to be still. Then came the moment no one saw coming. Aaliyah stood. She didn't speak. She didn't look around for permission. She just stood, teddy bear in one hand, the other arm still in a sling. Her mother touched her back as if to say, "You sure?" Aaliyah took a step forward, then another dot, and then she was walking slowly, each step echoing in the high-ceilinged room, toward the dog that had nearly destroyed her. Every person in that courtroom, whether wearing blue or black, whether holding anger or guilt, leaned forward as if to stop time itself. Rex looked at her. He didn't growl. He didn't lunge. He lowered himself, his back legs folding underneath him. His ears twitched, confused, but his body relaxed into a seated position. Aaliyah stopped 3 feet away. She knelt, and then, carefully, slowly, with her good hand, she reached out and laid it gently on Rex's head. A collective gasp ran through the room. Even the judge's eyes widened. Rex didn't flinch. He didn't bark. He simply stayed there, still as a statue, letting her touch him. A single tear rolled down Aaliyah's cheek. Her lips moved, barely audible, but the front row heard it. "I don't hate you." Officer Blake put his hand to his mouth, turning away. Aaliyah looked back toward the bench. "He didn't pick that job," she said, voice clear. "He was just doing what people told him to do." The silence broke, not with words, but with a wave of emotion. Some in the gallery cried. One juror pulled out a tissue. The officer holding Rex blinked hard and tightened his grip, not out of fear, but awe. Judge Monroe sat back slowly, her gavel resting gently in her hand. No one had any more questions. That single moment had said everything. No one in that courtroom would ever forget the sight. A little girl in a lavender dress, her injured arm in a sling, resting her hand on the head of a police dog that had once been her nightmare. But what happened next transcended even that dot as Aaliyah slowly pulled her hand back. Rex remained still. His eyes didn't dart. His body didn't tense. He simply stayed, watching her, not as a predator, but something else entirely. Maybe a servant seeking forgiveness, or a soul who didn't understand what had gone wrong. Aaliyah stood. She turned back toward the gallery. Her voice, though, soft, filled the room. I forgive him. The words didn't echo like some dramatic movie line. They landed with quiet weight, real, simple, earth-moving. Judge Monroe lowered her eyes, blinking slowly. Even the stenographer paused typing for a second. A woman in the back row wept openly. Another, wearing a blue pro-police shirt, covered her mouth with both hands. Aaliyah walked back to her seat. Her mother wrapped her arms around her the moment she sat down, pulling her close, pressing her forehead to her daughter's braids. Across the room, Officer Blake was no longer composed. He sat rigid, staring forward, but his chest was heaving. He clenched his jaw, blinked fast. Then he stood, slowly, unsteadily, and walked forward. The judge didn't stop him. Neither did the bailiff. Something sacred was happening, and the courtroom knew not to interfere. He approached the judge's bench, but stopped just short of it. He looked to the left, to the Sanders family. He didn't speak to the room. He spoke only to Aaliyah. I've thought about this every minute since that day, he said, voice strained. I've trained with that dog for years. I thought I understood him. I thought I understood the job. But I didn't understand what it means to carry the power to destroy, until I saw what happened to you. A tear slid down his cheek, unchecked. He didn't wipe it away. I can't undo what happened, he continued. But I want you to know I failed, not just as an officer, but as a protector. I'm sorry. It wasn't performative. It wasn't a legal strategy. It was grief. Plain and raw and human. Aaliyah looked at him. Her small voice responded, I know. And that was all. Officer Blake returned to his seat, his shoulders slightly lowered. Not defeated, but changed. The courtroom shifted again. What had started as a battle between sides, uniforms versus community, justice versus protocol, was becoming something else entirely. A shared reckoning. The final testimonies followed quickly. A doctor explained the trauma in clinical terms. A child psychologist testified that Aaliyah might carry this forever, but none of it carried the gravity of the moment just witnessed. Nothing could match the power of a child offering grace to the very creature that broke her. By the end of the day, the judge looked out over the room as if she, too, were witnessing something bigger than the case itself. I will deliver my ruling tomorrow, she said. But I will say this now. Justice is not only about punishment, it is also about restoration. And today, in this courtroom, I saw something none of us expected, a child showing the kind of strength that humbles grown adults. She stood. Court is adjourned. As the crowd filed out, there was no shouting, no applause, no sides. Just quiet. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had changed. The chants had faded. Now there were conversations. People who hadn't looked each other in the eye for weeks were suddenly talking. People in blue and black shirts stood side by side, watching the doors open. And when Aaliyah walked out, hand in hand with her mother, the crowd didn't cheer. They bowed their heads. Not in sorrow, but in reverence. Because for the first time, the town wasn't divided by what happened. It was united by how she responded. The following morning dawned with a soft light filtering through the courthouse windows, casting long shadows on the polished floors. Inside, the atmosphere was tense yet quiet, as if everyone, jurors, attorneys, spectators, held their breath, waiting for the final word. Judge Monroe took her seat with a calm but serious expression. The courtroom quickly filled, every seat occupied. Cameras were turned off, the usual buzz replaced by a profound stillness. Everyone knew this wasn't just a verdict. It was a moment that might change the community forever. After a brief introduction, the judge began. This case has tested us all, not only our understanding of law, but of compassion, responsibility, and justice. The facts are clear. A young girl was severely injured during a police operation involving a K-9 unit. The consequences of this event have reverberated far beyond this courtroom. She paused, glancing at Aliyah and her mother in the front row. The question before this court was whether Officer Blake and the police department acted negligently in the deployment of the K-9 unit, resulting in harm to a minor. Judge Monroe took a slow breath. After careful consideration of all evidence, testimonies, and the profound courage shown by the young victim, I find the following. Her voice steadied, yet carried the weight of finality. Officer Blake's actions, while intended to protect, fell short of the standard required when handling a potentially dangerous situation involving a child. The deployment of Rex under these circumstances was negligent. Murmurs rippled through the room. Aliyah gripped her mother's hand tightly, but did not cry. The officer sitting beside his attorney lowered his head. However, the judge continued, "This court acknowledges the complexity of the situation. The trauma experienced by Aliyah is undeniable, and the emotional accountability shown by Officer Blake is commendable." She looked directly at Blake. "Therefore, I am ordering the following measures. The police department must conduct an immediate review of K-9 deployment protocols, implement additional training focused on community safety, especially with children, and ensure transparency with the public moving forward." Aliyah's mother exhaled a shaky breath of relief that Judge Monroe's gaze softened. "Additionally, I encourage the department to establish community outreach programs to rebuild trust." She folded her hands. This court recognizes that justice does not end with a verdict, but begins anew with restoration. The gavel came down sharply. Case adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, there was a strange, almost sacred feeling hanging in the air. Strangers exchanged glances, some offering quiet nods of respect. Outside, reporters waited, but didn't crowd aggressively. It felt less like a spectacle, and more like a shared chapter closing. Aliyah stepped outside, clutching her mother's hand, and glanced back once at the building that had been the stage of so much pain and courage. Her eyes, though still marked by the trauma, shone with a new light resilience. Officer Blake approached quietly. He knelt to Aliyah's height and said, "Thank you for teaching me something I couldn't have learned any other way." She smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you for trying." In the weeks that followed, the police department held community meetings, inviting residents to voice concerns and ideas. They invited Aliyah and her family to speak about their experience, creating a bridge between law enforcement and the force neighborhood. The K-9 unit was retrained with stricter safety measures. Rex was retired from active duty, but remained with Officer Blake as a companion, a reminder of the delicate balance between power and care. The town began to heal. News outlets picked up the story, not just for the tragedy, but for the extraordinary courage and compassion that followed. People spoke of Aliyah as a symbol not of victimhood, but of strength and forgiveness. And in quiet moments, Aliyah kept drawing, not just rainbows and flowers, but pictures of police dogs and children playing together. Her art was her voice, one that told a story far beyond what had happened. It was a story about humanity, about mistakes, yes, but also about mercy. About fear, yes, but also about bravery, and about how even the smallest voices, when heard, can change the world.